Hi everyone, welcome to another Keats-Shelley Association of America interview. I'm Anna and I'm the Director of Communications, and I'm here today to introduce you to our Communications Fellows who are now working with us for 2 consecutive academic years from 2020 to 2022. They are Mariam Wasif and Amy Wilcoxon. Mariam teaches at the University of Paris 1, Panthéon-Sorbonne, and writes about rhetoric, race, and material culture in the long 18th century. Her book manuscript in progress is entitled Poisoned Vestments, Rhetoric and Material Culture in England and France, 1660 to 1820. Amy is a PhD researcher at the University of Nottingham, and she is working on editing the letters of the Scottish Romantic poet, Thomas Campbell. So together they've organised this exciting interview for you today with the editors of the forthcoming volume, Austen After 200, Reading After the Bicentenaries, a book that Mariam has also contributed an essay for. I hope you enjoy the interview, and don't forget to visit our YouTube channel for more interviews with scholars, writers and curators. Over to Amy now to tell us more about today's discussion.
Thanks so much, Anna. I'm just going to introduce myself and Mariam are going to introduce our speakers for today. So one of our speakers is Dr. Kerry Sinanan, who is assistant professor in 18th and 19th century transatlantic literature at the University of Texas at San Antonio. She publishes on the Black Atlantic, and her most recent articles are on 1808's The Woman of Colour and 1831's A History of Mary Prince. In 2021, she received the Rakow Research Grant from the Corning Museum for research on a project on slavery, glass, and whiteness. She has co-edited with Daniel Cook and Annika Bouts a forthcoming volume, which we're talking about today, Austen After 200, New Reading Spaces, which will be published by Palgrave Macmillan. And in this volume, her own essay, Mr. Darcy, Austen's Imperial Man of Feeling, discusses the imperial dimensions of Austen's heroes. She's currently completing her monograph, Myths of Mastery, Traders, Planters and Colonial Agents, 1750 to 1833, for the University of Carolina Press, and is under contract with Broadview Press for a new edition of The History of Mary Prince, 1831. Dr. Sinanan teaches courses on the Black Atlantic, slavery, race and literature, as well as survey courses on the period. I'll hand over to Mariam for the rest of our introductions.
Thanks, Amy. Dr. Daniel Cook is reader in English at the University of Dundee in Scotland, where he teaches 18th and 19th century literature. And his recent books include Walter Scott and short fiction with Edinburgh University Press in 2021, Reading Swift's Poetry, Cambridge University Press 2020, and with Nicholas Seeger, The Afterlives of 18th Century Fiction, also with Cambridge University Press in 2015. And his forthcoming publications include a new edition of Gulliver's Travels, the Cambridge Companion to Gulliver's Travels, and for Oxford World's Classics Scottish Poetry, 1730 to 1830. And he's also joined by Dr. Annika Bouts, who is Professor of 19th Century Literature and head of the School of Society and Culture at the University of Plymouth, UK. Her publications include books and essays on Jane Austen, Walter Scott, Edward Bulwer Lytton, and George Eliot on the history of the book in the Romantic and Victorian periods. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, all three of you. I mean, I wish we had the time to talk to all of you about all your forthcoming publications, because it sounds like you're all incredibly busy. But yes, as we've said, we're here today to talk about Austen After 200. So I'm going to start off by asking you all why you think so many people worldwide are kind of drawn to Austen, and why over 200 years since her death, why we're still so fascinated by her and her works.
I think there are lots of reasons for this. I can start off, but I'm sure Kerry and Daniel will want to join in. So I think one of the reasons is probably that a lot of her topics just are timeless. So the humour in her novels, I think appeals to us as much as it did to readers 100 years ago. Although, of course, famously not at the time of her writing. So humour is sort of something that readers started to focus on much later on. But I think now is one of the main things that draw readers to her novels. I think most of us can probably recite some of the dialogues by heart. So it's that kind of that stays with you, doesn't it? It's very fast paced, especially the dialogues, I think, which does make a difference. I think because part of our society is so fast paced in general, that sort of chimes with how we like to read and think. I'm sure the rise of feminisms of post-1970s, of course, has something to do with her popularity because of the way that she frames the heroines and the way that that readers like to engage with that and sort of I suppose imagine femininity both at the time and now. There's lots more I could say, but I think I'll see whether Kerry and Daniel want to come in.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Those are so many of the reasons, and I think certainly for me in this volume, I'm coming to Austen with two very distinct hats. One is like a reader of Austen who appreciates her on those kind of levels, but another is as a critic of maybe the Austen industry, which has been well mapped out by people like Devaney Loser and Gillian Dow's volume 2, and I think, you know, sorry to put a bit of a dampener, but I think we can't divorce the persistence of Austen culture from the economics of it all. I mean, she seems to be being remade in ways that I'm not sure she'd be entirely happy with herself, and in ways that we all discuss, and that's part of the issue, and that's part of the conversations that are in this volume, the uses to which Austen's put, but also the spaces in which Austen's read, and so, you know, there's what we're trying to do in the volume is to say, yes, well, academia has never been writing so prolifically about Austen as it continues to do now. And at the same time, fandoms and popular spaces and adaptation spaces are also making more Austen. I think it's such an important question about why that is. I will say one thing, which is maybe a worrying reason, which is the cultural currency of a nostalgia for the Regency period and what that might mean across the Atlantic, both in the UK and Europe, but also in North America here, where I do feel that there are certain imperial and I'll say racialized nostalgias that are at work that intersect with the gendered identities that Annika discussed. Now, none of this is to say this is all bad, but I think we need to very carefully examine the ways in which Austen can be read by, you know, women of color in North America as speaking to liberatory desires in individual characters, but also as speaking to oppressive regimes that maybe haven't really got rid of. So that's one way of thinking of it.
I think there's a great way to think about it. It's the sense that Austen speaks to different groups and in different ways. As the collection's really interested in different reading spaces, the spaces in which we engage with as much as can consume Austen's work, whether it's the classroom, the bookshop, the library, the cinema, even. I just think Austen is such a complicated and therefore really rewarding test case in any sense of cultural engagement. She's so central to 19th century culture, but of course speaks to different groups in the 21st century. The big ideas are there, the small ideas are there. Fundamentally, though, I think she's just one of those novelists who does the basics extremely well. Think about her characters, her plots, her setting. There's something timeless about her wit and humour, as Annika says, but still a provocative figure, as Kerry says as well. And yeah, what an important writer. And it's ongoing. Her publication is ongoing. I think that's in both an academic and a popular context. It's great.
I think she appeared to master the novel at a time when it just sort of emerged, and you know how many just her writing, the writing itself is just so. We try to avoid evaluative language in our critical spaces, but her writing is so speaks to so many people, as Daniel said, the writing itself.
Absolutely. Well, I am really lucky to be part of this collection. And so I'm also really excited to hear more about it from your editor's point of view. My essay, as you know, is about Emma and Empire and classical influence. And so I wanted to know, how did the idea for your collection, Austen After 200, New Reading Spaces, come about?
Well, maybe I should begin that one because it began a long time ago, and it's really interesting to track the history of the evolution of the volume alongside the time of the bicentenaries and the aftermath. And I think what the volume does is to track that little moment, that sort of last almost decade of what's happened. But certainly from 2013 onwards, when I was still lecturing in the UK, and I think many of the listeners will chime with this, there started to happen lots of events to celebrate the Austen bicentenaries. And some of these were academic, some of them were reading clubs. I hosted with my colleagues a sort of Austen public facing day for the general public of Bristol and the Arnolfini Theatre to talk about Pride and Prejudice. And lots of people came along, and it really opened my eyes as to how every single person that came was writing or doing something, making another cultural artifact of their own out of Jane Austen. One that sticks in my mind, and I often followed up, was what woman was writing the story of Mary, because she felt she was Mary out of Pride and Prejudice in her family, and Mary got a raw deal, so she was writing a novel called Mary of Longbourn or something. And I learned so much from listening to the public voices. And then other conferences, the Lucy Cavendish conference dedicated again to the bicentenary of Pride and Prejudice. There was Janet Todd there was P.D. James, there were academics dressing up as zombies. It was the first time I'd attended an academic conference in the UK where academics, not myself, but other academics, gave their papers in Regency dress. And then we're skipping around, and I know maybe in the US that's a more familiar mixing to people, the Dickens universe and Jasna, which Annika writes about Jasna events, where that blending between cosplay and fandom and academia blend. But certainly in the UK that appeared to me to be a rather newer phenomenon, and so that was really the genesis for the idea about why are we persisting and keeping these boundaries between academic, critical, public, review, journalistic spaces of reading Austen, when in fact we're all talking about it together and with multiple hats on at the same time. I can both appreciate Sanditon and critique it at the same time, and wish that she'd written the rest of the novel, had time to do so, and we can have these different hats on. So it was just this sense that the Austen bicentenaries were generating some, new spaces and new ways in which we would have to take account of, and how we influence each other in Austen spaces.
And Daniel, did you want to add anything, or has Kerry summed it up wonderfully?
I think Kerry summed it up absolutely wonderfully. I think it was, as Kerry said, I think it was just trying to recognise in a different way all the various spaces that there are. So rather than just rely on academics or scholarly writings up of consuming and producing Austen in different ways, it was asking those producers of Austen and those sort of creative ways of engaging with Austen to be part of the collection, so that the communication can be more meaningful, I guess, and the dialogue more reciprocal.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant. I mean, you've kind of preempted my next question, but I was going to ask, I don't know if you wanted to add anything further. What do you think this collection does differently, and what does it bring to Austen studies in 2021?
When you think about Austen adaptations, you think about the page to the screen, film adaptations. We've definitely got a little bit of that in the collection. What I think is really interesting about this collection is, and it emerged very organically actually, is just the range of different spaces and the different ways in which Austen is engaged with. There's essays there on pedagogy, there are essays there on the academic conference, and in particular dressing up at the academic conference, the blogger sphere, which has become a really important place for Austen scholarship, but also Austen fan fiction as well. And I think there are a handful of books on Austen adaptations that engage with the users of Austen. That's Gillian Dow's phrase. And in many ways, this collection expands on that in ways that I was quite surprised by, in a pleasant way, actually. It's very nice during the editing process when different contributors come on board and you receive their essays, and from within the collection has emerged in such a fascinating way. And actually, I think as we keep joking, Anna, Kerry and I, we kind of need a sequel. We're already thinking about sequel, perhaps even a trilogy. Just the different ways in which Austen's works proliferate in different spaces, and as those spaces open up further, pleasingly so, the conversations will get wider, bigger, and so on. Yeah.
And I just would add into that, which is all perfect. I think even the academic essays have changed slightly in quality and focus. Certainly Annika here wrote her essay to consider the review culture, which is her, Annika's specialism. But just that sort of looking out, and Daniel's essays on adaptations, and myself and Miriam, our essays are looking at this being drawn to the sort of nostalgia for imperial culture and what drives that. And that doesn't mean they're not academic essays, but it does mean that we're just being shifted a little bit and looking outward as we consider. It's not possible to write about Austen, I think, without looking at how she's being engaged in all these different spaces.
I think you're right, Kerry, and I think and I think and you as well, Daniel, of course. I think the one of the nice things about the collection and putting the essays together like that was that I do think that our essays changed through having essays in there that weren't I say just in inverted commas, just academic essays and just the kind of scholarly essays that we're all much more used to. So it became much more of a dialogue, and I think that was partly why it was so enjoyable to be part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've spoken a little bit to the importance of having a range of collaborators within your collection, not just academics, but podcasters and creatives. And I know you had Bianca Hernandez-Knight and Lauren Burke and Hannah Chapman of the Bonnets at Dawn podcasters. So could you tell us a little bit about the contributions in the collection, how the essays speak to one another and fit together?
Absolutely. So one aspect we were quite keen on was not only including people who by training are creatives, blog editors, blog contributors, and so on, but we really want to retain their voices within the essays. That sounds slightly pretentious, but I don't mean it in a pretentious way. We wanted the collection to be really authentic, actually, because one of the issues we wanted to address is perhaps the inherent elitism associated with Austen studies. We wanted to challenge that a bit more, really following the steps of people like Devaney Lucer, who's done so much to open up the field, to break down this strange invisible line between high and low, and this strange attachment to the ivory tower, which of course Austen herself in the 19th century would have been excluded from. It just seems ludicrous to think about Austen in any way that is prohibitive to the people who actually enjoy her work and want to engage with it. So we were really keen to embrace those voices. We were so lucky, and this is really down to a lot of the hard work of Kerry, who set up the project. We were so lucky to bring on board such open-minded authors who were very open to constructive criticism, but quite rightly, they pushed back sometimes and said, well, this is my style, this is what I want to say, can you help me articulate that in the right way? And that's really the role of the editor, of course, and I'm just delighted that we could embrace that. And our publisher, Paul Grave Macmillan, were really keen to embrace that as well, get away from this stuffy old sort of conference proceedings and get something a bit more dynamic and actually useful. And so I'm really pleased with what we put together. It comes down not only to the hard work of Kerry and Annika, but also the contributors themselves. And we got lucky. And I look forward to sharing the outcome with everyone. I think everyone's going to be really pleased with what we put together.
Yeah, and I think part of, edited collections can be notoriously a mixed experience. They can come together in a flash, or they can take a long time, as this one did. But I think I want to make really clear, maybe more for academia than anything, that sometimes this work is an act of curation and selecting and deselecting. I mean, people jumped on and off, as the collection became clearer. Some people themselves said, well, my essay really no longer fits with that. And that was really true too. And then, there are bloggers like Maggie Sullivan. We're lucky enough to get one of the foremost bloggers. We're lucky enough to get Bonnets at Dawn, Lauren Burke and Hannah Chapman, but they're professional writers too, and their book on how she wrote is on Amazon selling away very well here, and there Bianca Hernandez is a social media public relations expert, but she also manages Austen Spaces. So giving people time to actually, or asking people at the right time to contribute into this really pushes, I think, academic timetables. So, searching for that kind of diversity of voices and diversity of contributors from different backgrounds to have a collection that isn't the usual crowd, it does take time and work. And it's part of why, as a collective of editors, we work together. It required this collective in the end. It required Daniel, Annika, and myself working together as a community of editors. And I like the way that the project itself pushed us to think in ways that break down more individualistic models of academic work.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think just to emphasize perhaps how much it pushed us as well, because I certainly hadn't edited contributions of that nature before, so it was quite a learning curve actually, and a really positive one, of course, because it also makes you realize your own limitations and how perhaps quite narrow your thinking's been so far. So it's been really good to kind of engage with a much broader kind of writing and a much broader field of writing. And
maybe preemptively I'll say that we'll be interested to see the reception of this book. I'm interested to see what kind of feathers it ruffles, or what we manage to persuade people. I think that the collection is also making an argument, and I think people will have stuff to say about that position, and that'll be interesting to see.
You're making it sound very intriguing. I can't wait to get my copy and get reading. It sounds really wonderful. And I know you've said that you're thinking about a sequel or maybe even a trilogy. You said earlier, is that going to be like Austen after 210, 220? It'll grow ever bigger. I just wondered where you all thought the kind of study of Austen will go in the future, in generally, and whether you yourselves are going to continue working on Austen, do you think?
It's a really difficult question, Amy. I mean, it's a wonderful question too. And of course, from our current standpoint, so early 21st century, I don't think any of us can imagine Austen ever not being popular or not being read, or anybody not engaging with her. But then I'm sure 200 years ago, people would have answered that question very differently. So I suppose we can only talk about our own cultural assumptions. And they, of course, are that she is crucial to lots of things our culture does, but I do also think every culture and just as every reader appropriates her and reads her slightly differently, and every, actually not just readers, but all the whole Austen community consumes Austen in different ways and interprets her in different ways, and I think that will certainly continue. I think as cultures evolve, so will our approaches to Austen. So I'm sure there are things about her that will be said we can't imagine now. So I think it's an almost impossible question to answer, but I think it'd be quite exciting to see what the future brings, and I'm sure there'll be new ways of new reading spaces, but also new ways of, so not just new ways of engaging with her, but also new things will be said about her that we haven't come across yet.
I like that. I think that sounds really exciting, doesn't it? We're not quite sure what will happen, but we know things will happen with Austen. She's certainly here to stay. At the same time, I hope some current trends continue. I think there's so much great work being done in reception studies. Annika's work on Austen and reception is really important. Austen as a reader, Austen as a poet, different facets of her writing. Austen's juvenilia is gaining a lot of traction among scholars. Austen and different technologies, different reading technologies. I mean, Austen in Austen and other authors. I'd quite like to see more influence studies, get a sense of the very concrete ways in which Austen has influenced people. We found a bunch of quotations from authors and disavowing Austen's influence. And you see this in Devaney's book, actually, the authors that claim that I wasn't influenced by Austen. I think a couple of our contributors really picked up on that theme. Once you dig into it, actually, those authors very clearly were influenced by Austen. So why are they claiming not? And there's a cultural game afoot there. So I'm hoping scholars can really pull on that thread, as it were. So yeah, completely with Annika on this one. Excited about what will happen, things that we just don't know. We're not sure what the world will look like in 2022, let alone 2032. But at the same time, I do hope some of the current trends continue, because I think Austen studies is very exciting right now and has been for the best part of a decade or more.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the final essay in the volume is an interview with Bianca Hernandez, who's just launched JaneCon in the last 2 years. And in a way, that was, again, something we had to wait for the volume, because that new space, which is really a response to, you know, a lot of the Jane Austen events are prohibitively expensive apart from anything else. I mean, Austen still remains mired in sort of gatekeeping structures that are to do with class and gender and various other, you know, race. And so I think that the digital spaces are giving spaces for a whole lot of responses to Austen that come from scholars, people of colour, craft makers. The Austen sort of verse in terms of, you know, the Ladies Magazine project, that Jenny Batchelor is leading, but also what sewing and crafting means for different people, not just for white women, but for, you know, women of colour, is really, really important. And so I think there's actually an argument happening right now in Austen studies that we'll want to try. I'll certainly want to track it very carefully, which is this, you know, oh, Austen is tea and scones and walking around the pump room, or no, actually Austen was a voracious reader of popular culture, as in, you know, Romance of the Forest, and she subverts many of the patriarchal structures, and arguably white patriarchal structures, but also what does she mean? What does she keep coming to mean? And why are we continually drawn to her? And I think, you know, Sanditon's just starting up its second series out of a huge debate about what that series meant, who it was for, and, you know, arguably it was relaunched again because Bridgerton was a success. So there's that idea of diversity in casting. How many black and brown people should we imagine around the edges of Austen's fiction is something I'm quite interested in. So there's no chance of, I think, of things stopping, and if anything, I think making sure that we're engaged in these debates is going to be part of our responsibility, I would go as far as to say, especially as 18th century and romantic scholars.
So we'll end on sort of a lighter question, which is, if you were stuck on a desert island, which Austen novel would you take for company?
I mean, only allowed one. All right then. I think I'd go for Pride and Prejudice. I think Elizabeth. I do find Elizabeth irresistible. I think the fairy tale element there, and I do get something. I suppose for all of them, I get something else from every reading, but probably from Pride and Prejudice most of all. Yeah.
I have to concur. I mean, you know, the when I lecture or teach, it's Mansfield Park. You know, and I'm there to spoil everybody's fun and tell them that Austen does not mean what you think it means. But if I need, as Daniel was saying, you know, a novel that's a perfect novel to read and reread and reread, that's Pride and Prejudice is going to come with me, I think.
It does change on a daily basis, changes on mood as well. But I'm thinking, if I'm trapped on a desert island, I'm just going to need something to cheer me up. I need a good laugh. It's a toughie. I would probably go with Pride and Prejudice, or Persuasion, or Mansfield Park, or whatever. I really don't know. I would. Mansfield Park, I really enjoyed teaching. Persuasion as well, actually. I've been teaching Persuasion for a couple of years. I'm really enjoying teaching that. It just garners really interesting responses from different students. But I'm looking for laugh out loud, guaranteed good time, Pride and Prejudice.
Good choices. What about you, Marianne? What would you choose?
We work together well. See, we all agree on that.
Pride and Prejudice. I was going over in my mind what I would choose while we're talking. I really enjoy Emma. I mean, I'm really fascinated by Emma because I've written about her, but I don't know, it's not always for me a kind of lighthearted read. I find it a little bit enraging sometimes. And I also, this is an unusual choice, but I really like Sense and Sensibility a lot as a comfort read. It's not as funny, I don't think, as Pride and Prejudice, but there's something really charming about it. What about you, Amy?
I like Emma. Don't know why. I really like Emma. I like Knightley, I think, as a kind of unconventional Austen hero, I think.
I think Emma's, I agree, Amy. I think it's got that kind of detective element almost, hasn't it? Like it's probably the one that's most different on a second reading, because you pick up on a lot of the stuff that on a first read, well, I certainly didn't all those years ago pick up on. So I think that's sometimes where Emma is fun. They're all fun though.
They are all fun, yeah.
Maybe we could get around it by saying we'll take this like complete works and just take all of them in one volume to a desert island and just read them all over and over again. But yes, thank you all very, very much for taking the time to talk to us today. I'm sure everybody is looking forward to reading Austen After 200, and will enjoy watching this interview for that reason too. And I'll hand back to Anna.
Thank you. I just want to cast my vote for Emma as well. So now we're equal to 6. Yeah. Anyway, thank you all for a wonderful interview and for joining us today.